have a look at what machine you are actually driving, its type, tier, main strengths and weaknesses. Then have a look at what map you are playing on, and think about the typical role and locations for your type of machine. Next up is team composition. Have a look how the team distribution goes for your own team and between your own and the enemy team. Next, definitely have a look, is there any artillery in the match? A very important point we will discuss a little bit later. And finally, be prepared to change your decision as soon as the game starts. The actual team deployment can override the previous decision. So that's quite a lot to consider in 30 seconds, isn't it? No need to worry though. In reality, this sounds a lot scarier than it actually is. And if you work on it, very soon you will run these through in your head in just a couple of seconds. The main goal is, have a plan by the time the counter ticks down, and that plan should be a little bit more detailed than to go and kick some ass. Now, let's check out each of these points a little bit closer and see what you will actually have to think about. Step 1. Look at your weapon of choice and the map you are playing it on. It's pretty obvious that you usually will have to take a tank destroyer completely elsewhere than a heavy tank. Just by looking at the map, you should know exactly where the typical heavy engagement zones are, where the mediums usually clash, where the tank destroyers wait in ambush, and so on. If there is any map where you are not 100% clear on the usual spots, you do have some homework. Read the forums, watch the videos, and check out the heat maps over on vbaddict.net. They are a great tool to get started, so check them out. Link is in the description below. Step 2. Once you are clear on where you should typically go, check out if the matchmaking gods have smiled on you. Are you top tier, bottom tier, something in between? Your respective tier should heavily influence where you go and how you play. Let me give you a quick example. You are a top tier heavy tank. Great! No change of plan, you go to the typical heavy engagement zone and wreck face by simply using your previously learned basic tank driver skills. But then again, next match comes along and same map, but this time you are bottom tier. Now you must absolutely avoid being in the front line, you just won't stand a chance most of the time. You can still go to the same area, but make sure that you stay in the second or third line and play support only. And if you do this, please make sure that you can actually play support and not just sit in the back being completely useless. This time around you are more looking for cheeky flanking shots and general support rather than face-to-face engagement, so going to other areas not typical for your type of vehicle could actually work in your favor as well. Step 3. Always consider the strengths and weaknesses of your tank and put yourself in the best possible position. This is where a lot of people go wrong. Let's say you did look at points 1 and 2 and established where you have to go in order to have the best impact on the game. Or did you? Are you sure you can maximize your strengths and minimize your weaknesses in that spot? Let me give you a classic example. You are in your T-32 heavy tank. It has an amazing turret, excellent gun depression, and completely rubbish hull armor, especially on the sides. You get Redshire on the map rotation with the northern spawning point. The typical heavy engagement area is along the zero line on the top of a hill with a nicely angled ramp leading up there. Now, should you go there? Absolutely. The T-32 is strongest when played hull down, so give yourself the best advantage in this position. Now, let's look at another classic example, still in your T-32. Now you get Ensk in a standard battle. The typical heavy engagement area is in the middle of the city. You are once again top tier. Should you go there? Oh, hell no. The other heavies will have an advantage over you as they are better in face-to-face brawling, and they will most probably stomp you. Instead, you should deviate from the obvious heavy spot and position yourself in one of the windows of the destroyed houses, guarding the flanks until the heavy fight starts. Then and only then can you move up the flanks to get into their sides when their attention is divided at best. Don't be afraid to choose a non-traditional spot if it helps you exploit your strengths and dish out even more damage. Step 4. Always consider team composition, aka how will the match most probably play out, and how can I use this to my advantage? When talking about team composition, you have to consider two things. First of all, check if the split between the different types like heavies, TDs, mediums and so on are in line, or if the teams have maybe more mediums and only a couple of heavies. For example, if you see that both teams have only 2 heavy tanks and most players are on mediums, you can anticipate that the typical medium zones will be under a lot of pressure, while the typical heavy engagement zones will be less contested. And how can you use this information to your advantage? Well, let's say you are in a tank destroyer, and you usually support the heavies. This time around, you should get into a position that allows support for your mediums, as they will be under much more pressure. The second thing you have to check out when looking at the team composition is if the distribution of TDs, heavies, and so on is even between the two teams or not. Often enough, you will find that the enemy team has double as many heavies, while your team has a lot more mediums. It's quite obvious what will happen in the typical engagement zones now, won't it? So, why not use this information to your advantage? Are you in a top tier heavy tank and versus your 3 heavies you can expect an avalanche of 7 enemy heavy tanks? So why would you go in the usual spot when you know exactly that you will be outnumbered, you will get outflanked and completely destroyed? Take up instead position somewhere that you can defend better, and you will have also support fire from your team. Even if this location is just slightly further away from your typical position, the difference in result will be huge. Step 5. Is there artillery in the match? Welcome to the most common mistake players make. They consider all these points, put themselves into a great position, or so they think, and then whine and bitch about the artillery that came down like an anvil on them. You just have to take artillery into consideration and adjust your game accordingly. Especially when there is more artillery in the match, some parts of the map will just become very risky, or even downright suicidal. Now, you don't have to like it, but not willing to adjust is about as smart as knowingly leaving your home in the rain without an umbrella, and then bitch all the way that there should be sunshine instead. Rule of thumb: when there is RT in the game, avoid flat surfaces and try to stick to the mountains and rough terrain in general. That gives RT players a tough time to hit. A good example for this is the 2 line on Prohorovka. This is usually a heavy engagement area with heavy TD support at each end of the road. In a game without artillery, this can be a good place for heavy tank if they advance carefully and if they have enough support. With artillery, however, the whole area becomes a death trap to anything but the quickest or stealthiest of tanks, and should be avoided for most. And finally, step 6. Team deployment. How often did you have the perfect plan by the time the counter reached 0, and then the whole team decided to zerk down on one side of the map in a classic lemming train? Or somebody else beat you to your favorite sniping spot? The worst thing you can do in such a situation is to stick to your original plan regardless, probably just cursing away. Adaptation is the key. Your plan is only good until the circumstances change. Keep a plan B should your favorite spot be already taken, and if there is a lemming train, surprisingly enough, the best thing you actually could do is to join it and make sure that it at least pushes all the way down the map and does not get stuck somewhere in the middle. You could also try to defend the cap in a strong position, if you have enough support from like-minded teammates. Whatever you choose, sacrificing yourself on the empty front is not doing the right thing, and there will be nothing heroic about it either. Whoa, quite a list we have there. Not to worry though, this will become routine very quickly. The only thing you have to remember is that the later points can always override the previous ones. Main thing is, you adapt to the circumstances to put yourself in the strongest position possible. But you are probably wondering how this actually looks in reality. Well, let's have a quick look at 2 basic examples to walk you through the thought process. In the first example, we are in our KV-85 on the Live Oaks map in a standard battle. Let's go through the checklist together. Step 1. Optimal map location by category. We are in a heavy tank on Live Oaks, so we will go up the city to the north, which is usually where heavy tanks go to fight it out. Step 2. Respective tiers. We are in a tier 6 machine in a tier 7 match, and almost everyone we will face will be at the same or higher tier than us. So this means I will position myself in the western part of the city, aka in the back. With this, I will allow stronger heavies to engage each other first. I will definitely have opportunity shots from the back and also some flanking possibilities, so I definitely won't be sitting useless in the back. Step 3. Strengths and weaknesses. The gun depression on the KV-85 is quite bad, so going to the eastern front along the railway would be a bad idea most of the time. No change of plan so far. Step 4. Team composition. The teams are fairly evenly balanced by vehicle types, but both of them have a lot of heavies. Most probably the city will be a really heavily contested area, so it's a good idea to go there and support the team. We will, however, keep an eye on the railway track just to be sure. Step 5. Artillery. There are actually 2 arty players on the enemy team, but the city area is anyway the best protection against them, so still no change. And finally, Step 6. Team deployment. There are no surprises at the beginning of the match, so to the back of the city we go. Now, let's have a look at the second and final example, where we are in our T-34 on the Karelia map, once again in a standard battle. Let's go through the checklist one more time. Step 1. Optimal map location by category. We are in a medium tank on Karelia.